So on Instagram I came across this jeweler and I wanted to make a set of these earrings, or at least my own version of these earrings. So I messaged her and asked if I would be able to do that, and in return I will give her a shout out on my video and point everyone to her. So make sure to check out her page. She has a lot of really nice hand done stuff. The link will be in the description below. And yeah, let's get into this. So here's everything I'm going to need. So here's my pattern for my version of these stud earrings. I printed them on some sticky label paper, but you can print them on normal paper and just glue them to your piece, or you can just hand draw them if you want. So I'm just going to cut some out and stick them to my silver sheet. I'll leave a link in the description so you can download the file to print these out yourself if you want. Also, if you're wondering, this sheet metal is about 0.6 millimeters thick. You can really use whatever size you want, but that's what I'm going to go with. So now I'm just going to cut both pieces out of the sheet metal with my jeweler's saw. Due to my camera being right where my head would normally be so I can see directly down at what I'm sawing, I can't get the perfect cuts I would like, so this is going to be as close as I'm going to be able to get like this, and I'll be able to fix a lot of it with my file. So now that they're done, I'll be able to smooth them out with my file and take out any imperfections and kind of round them a little bit more. I'll also be using a rotary tool to clean out the inside curvatures of the moon, along with polishing up the outside a little bit. Once all that's done, I'm going to take the pattern paper off of them so I can see what I have to work with. So now I'm going to mock up where the stones are going to go on these and make sure everything fits within the actual silver moon. So everything looks good and everything's fitting in the right spots. Now I need to make bezels for these. So I'm going to use this bezel wire to make my bezels, which it's way too tall for this piece, so I'm going to have to cut it down. After measuring my stone, I found I need to go up 1.4 millimeters to make it so I can actually close this over the stone and keep it in place. And for the length of the bezel, I'm just going to cut more than I need so I know for sure I'll have enough. So this bezel wire is made from fine silver, which is a lot easier to bend and mold around than sterling silver. But because this is so thin and so moldable, it makes it very hard to use a saw to cut it. I'll be finishing it with the saw, but normally I would use some sort of metal cutters, but then they also have a problem with leaving marks in the metal that you have to go back and clean off. So I'm going to do it with the saw, and everything should work out just fine. As you can see, this is really thin. It's only 0.37 millimeters thick, and as you can see, extremely easy to bend. So if you're not familiar with how to use a jeweler saw, I highly suggest using some sort of metal cutters if you plan on doing this, or order the right size bezel, and you don't have to worry about this at all. So when working with stones that are this small, it's really hard to actually make a round bezel for them. So I have this tool. All I need to do is find the right size on here, and then I can wrap my bezel around it, and then cut it to size. So I don't want this piece of the bezel to be sticking up like this because that's not round. So I'm going to tap it very lightly with a hammer so it conforms to the proper shape. Then I'll just wrap the bezel around the top of that and cut it off with these wire cutters. So I just have to trim it down a little bit more so the two ends meet one another, and then I'll use a hammer to make sure everything's all nice and snug and lined up. And here's the tiny bezel. I'm going to use a pair of pliers now to pinch the end where I'm going to be soldering it so the joint is kind of flat right here, and then I'll reshape it to be perfectly round after it's done being soldered. And I'll be doing that same process for the next bezel. So before I solder the bezels onto the moon-shaped studs, I'm going to make the posts. And I'm going to make them a little over 10 millimeters long, and the actual wire I'm using for this is 0.8 millimeters thick. To mark where I'm going to be cutting, I just scratch it with my calipers, and then use some wire cutters to cut this. So I'm going to file down the ends of these now because the cutters I use will make sharp edges, and I will actually want to have a small burr on these for when I solder them to the backs of the moons. As for the other end, I want that to have no sharp edges because that's what's going to be going through your ear. So I'm going to use this cup burr. This will cut it into a ball shape, or a rounded domed shape at least. So yeah, if you're making any type of earrings, make sure that the part that goes through your ear is as smooth as possible so you don't cut yourself or anyone else. Try to only use silver or gold as your posts because a lot of people's skin reacts really badly to copper and brass. So next we can finally start soldering. I'm going to flux these two bezels first and then put a piece of solder underneath where the solder joint is going to be. And when I heat them up, the solder will flow upwards through it and it has less of a chance of popping off because it has the whole bezel sitting on top of it. I'm going to be using hard solder for this because I have to solder on the post also, and I don't want these to fall off when I'm soldering the posts. So you have to use different types of solder for multiple solder pieces. Also, these are very thin and very easy to melt, so I have to be very careful and apply heat evenly and move a lot so I don't melt these. So after all that, and after taking these out of the pickling solution to remove any fire scale, I can now shape them back into perfect circles and make sure that the stones fit inside of them. And since both the stones fit, I can now move on to soldering the bezels to the studs. I fluxed both pieces, and now I'm going to put a piece of medium silver solder into the center of the bezel, and that will solder these two pieces together. So here they are after taking them out of the pickling solution to clean them up, and now I'm going to center punch the middle of the bezels. I'm doing this so I can drill a hole that is centered, and this hole will be for the post. Remember how I said I needed a burr on the post? This is why. It's going to be put inside of the hole, and it's going to be a little bit bigger, but it has bendable metal, so it'll jam its way in there and stay, and then I can solder it in place. This isn't the only way to do this, it's just how I like to do it. I feel it's a little more secure and maybe a stronger bond. And this will be my last solder point, so I'll be using easy solder for these, after fluxing both pieces of course. Again, be careful not to melt these pieces because they're very small and it's pretty easy to melt stuff like this. And time for one last pickle bath before we can set the stones. Before I even put the stones in, I'm going to make sure that the bezel is completely flat and doesn't have any real sharp edges to it, so I'm going to use some 220 grit sandpaper to make sure of that. Then with a metal diamond bit, I'm going to carefully clean out the inside because one of the stones was a little tight and I'd rather not fight with it to get it in here and accidentally crack it. So to put these inside of their bezels, I'm going to put the stone face down on my bench and put the bezel over it. This is easier when the stones are smaller like this and hard to hold with tweezers. And as a side note, a lot of people use adhesives to keep their stones in place in their bezels. I don't, but if it makes it easier for you and you trust it more that it's going to stay in there, then by all means go for it. But just so you know, I don't use any glue on any of my stuff unless it's absolutely needed. So I'm going to use a burnisher to set these, and I'm going to just start by rubbing it on the sides of it and going around in circles until you can see the metal starting to slightly fold over and get a really shiny edge to it. And I'll just keep going around and around until they're set and they don't wiggle around in the bezel anymore. Alright, and one of the last things I have to do is polish them. I'm going to be using a wool polishing wheel with some silver polishing compound and my rotary tool and a pair of pliers that have a plastic grip to them so I don't mar the piece or make marks on it, and so I don't burn my fingers, because this makes the metal extremely hot from all the friction. Alright, and there we go. All I need to do now is clean off any residue from the polishing compound, and these are good to go. So for my next video, would you like to see something made with pearls? Or would you like to see a ring like this made? Go ahead and leave a comment below and let me know which one you would like to see, and whatever one has the most comments, that's the one that I'll make next. So I got my first jewelry submission from Sherry Windsor. It looks to be a silver dragonfly that consists of 4 large bezels and a small one for the head, some twisted wire up at the top for the bail, and a bunch of texturing work. So great job. If you'd like to see more of her work, look for a link in the description to her Facebook page. And if you'd like to see your work here, just send in your submission to my email address in the description below. Thank you for watching my video, and if you have any questions, go ahead and leave a comment below and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. Also, I have some good news. I reopened my Etsy shop, so you'll be able to actually buy some of the stuff that I make if you want to, because people have been requesting it, so I might as well open it up. And everything that is bought through my Etsy shop will go towards the channel and supporting what I make on here for you guys, and showing off more ways to make things. So thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.